Each of you should select a consultant, whoever you wish, who's going to advise you along the way. You can take Gabe? Who are you going to take? You can take Jay? Okay, fine, fair enough. Okay, let's trade your expert advisor. This is a hypothetical, right? And the hypothetical is designed to illustrate the application of the Coase theorem in the context of environmental pollution. And the source of the environmental pollution is sulfur dioxide. We'll assume, for simplicity, to illustrate the basic concepts, that one power plant is emitting all of the sulfur dioxide, and this is what Ms. Alvarez is doing to society as a whole. All right? And there's a marginal cost of abatement and a marginal benefit of sulfur dioxide abatement, and that's illustrated in your text reading for the lecture last Thursday, not today. All right, so, Trey, why don't you explain this graph to us? What does it mean? Here? Uh-huh. Why is that the optimal? The externalities are being covered? What does that mean? Internalized? Where are they internalized in this graph? That's right. This is, okay, Trey's just explained to us this is not social costs and benefits, right? Is that clear to everybody? All right, go ahead, Trey. Of what? Of abatement. Okay, that's exactly what it is. The choice problem facing the emitter is what is that emitter's marginal cost, and that's reflected here by this particular curve. And for lower amounts of abatement, the incremental cost isn't that great, right? So what is that? That's at, say, 1 million tons abated here. This is, on the vertical axis, is the marginal cost. All the way out here, for 8 million tons of abatement, that is to say, eliminating from the environment 8 million tons. That's the way to think about it, because you're abating the actual emissions of 8 million tons of sulfur dioxide, and the incremental cost right there is $3,500 per ton. And moreover, the marginal benefits, what lies behind that marginal benefit? Let's go to our other consultant, Gabe.
So million tons abated, and the cost of marginal benefit, it seems like there's some kind of incentive, physical incentive for them to abate, right? So maybe
physical incentive for them to abate.
If you have a constant marginal benefit for abating, that means there must be something that they're getting something as benefit, right? And if the marginal cost of abatement is going up, the marginal benefit is I would assume like maybe it's like a subsidy for benefit. I don't know what the benefit would be.
To the emitter? To the emitter. Mm-hmm. But where does that come from? I understand that we're looking at the decision problem with regard to the emitter. Somebody, you're quite right, somebody is paying them a subsidy for abating. But where's that subsidy coming from? How do we determine what that subsidy should be?
Probably command and control.
Command and control.
Unless they're dealing with a town, maybe? I mean, like we did an example last year with a town paying for the abatement. So I mean, that could be what it is. I don't know where it comes from.
But the sulfur dioxide is the cause of the environmental harm, right? And remember, whenever we were talking about environmental harm, there is a monetization of that environmental harm, which is the environmental damage. So, given our air pollution discussion, if the sulfur dioxide is a precursor for acid rain, what are the environmental costs of the acid rain, right?
All right, so the marginal benefit is not for the company, but for the environment.
For society as a whole. Now, if you want to give the right incentives to the company, and you measure what the marginal damages are as a result of that acid rain, namely health risk, whatever state preferences or reveal preference, but we get a fix on what those environmental damages are, and then coming back to your point about the subsidy, the government comes along and sets a subsidy, and here it's a constant subsidy per million tons of $3,500.
So the marginal benefit of abatement is the inverse of the marginal cost.
Yes, exactly. That's the way to think about this particular graph. So let's turn, given that background, let's turn and look at the incentives for both Jake as the environmental agent and Ms. Alvarez as the emitter agent. I'm sure that makes you feel comfortable being the emitter, right? Okay, so the first example is what happens if the property right is held by the environmentalist. Now, you're the environmentalist, right, Jake? So what are you going to do with that property right? From admitting anything, right? Because if you own the right, and now what's your optimal solution, Ms. Alvarez? What are you going to do, given that Jake has the property right and he says you can't admit anything? So how would you go about it? What are you going to offer him? By the way, let's back up for a moment. Let's ask your consultant. Why is that the deadweight loss that's represented here of $3.105 billion? Why is that the deadweight loss? And as a result, if we're out at 9.1 million, because the marginal cost is above the marginal benefit, we're generating losses that are being imposed as a result of not controlling this pollutant, right? Okay, you're going to offer him what now? You're going to offer anything less? Okay, and what's that amount? Do you want to tell me what the amount is? Because he's not going to respond if you say anything less, right, Jake? That's not enough information for him to respond. Okay, and Jake, what's your response? Okay, you will accept anything less, but can you give me a real number? What's your reservation? What's your default option? You may want to consult with your consultant. Say what? You keep admitting. I thought you were the environmentalist. you gotta hire a new consultant. Okay, you want to replace your consultant? Because you're the environmentalist. You have the property right. Yes. You what? I understand, but Ms. Alvarez has come to you and said, listen, I understand that you have the property right, but I'm going to offer you something, right? And she's told you, told him a range of what you're going to offer him. Right. But wait a minute. Let's come back to this. The 6.9. This is what, because he's got the property right. I'm sorry. So you're going to be incurring cost up here for the incremental amount of admission. All right. So for say 1 million tons, you can offer what to him and be better off? A little less, right? Because that's 1.1. So she can offer you that much. You with us, Jake? Speak up.
A bit less than 2.15 billion.
So that you will allow. What she's asking for is can I substitute for you for a second? Okay. She's asking you if you will allow her to admit 1 million tons of sulfur dioxide because you have the property right, and she's going to offer you, say, what would you say? A little less than. Would you say a little less than what?
3.15 billion.
Okay. Are you prepared to accept that? You're not. He could certainly pick higher, but the question is, will he be better off than imposing upon her no admission by taking her offer and allowing her to admit something?
Why is it 3.15?
Oh, no, because when we were going through the graphical analysis, I said just what would you offer him to allow you to admit 1 million tons, just to start the process. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So are we getting the fundamentals here with regard to the incentives that exist for negotiation? Because both parties, if their transaction cost is less than 3.105, now, if it's greater than 3.105, they're not going to reach any resolution because the cost of the negotiations and the transaction costs are greater than the benefit of the bargain, right? And if for example, there was zero transaction cost, then there's huge benefits of the bargain. The environmentalist holding those property rights can actually gain by allowing some amount of pollution, right? Okay, let's go to the second case. And now let's switch. Now Ms. Alvarez has the property right, and you, Jake, have no property rights, right? Now, under these circumstances, the actual amount of dead weight losses is much larger than it was in the first case, right? Because what Ms. Alvarez, given that she has the property right, she's going to admit as much as she wants. It's not going to abate anything, right? But you have an incentive. Look at this entire range. Jake is sitting here for any amount of abatement that he can create incentives for her to abate. He's going to make $3,500, right? In terms of the value to him representing the environmental resource. Right? And as a result, they will continue to negotiate. And if transaction costs are zero, they'll continue to negotiate all the way out to the point at which Trey, right? The point at which marginal cost. Trey, thank you. I appreciate the clarification. Okay. So once again, if there's zero transaction costs, then they're going to bargain their way to an optimal solution. If there is some positive transaction costs, they're not going to get all the way to the point at which the abatement cost and the marginal benefits of abatement are equal here. And that's the point that's illustrated. Yeah? Well, it just means if, in fact, the transaction costs are greater than 17.2 billion, then they're not going to negotiate. And as a result, whoever has the property right, in this case, Ms. Alvarez has the property right, and she's going to admit. And so too bad for Jake. Jake has failed in his representation of the environment because he doesn't have the property right. Right? Okay? All right. Now, what institutions exist in the real world with regard to pursuing efficiency? Efficiency in the sense of eliminating, by the way, any time there's a dead weight loss, we don't have an efficient solution, right? If I tell you there's some dead weight loss, you know instantaneously there's some efficiencies that can be captured by eliminating that dead weight loss, right? And the dead weight loss only happens because there is some difference between the marginal cost, in this case, the marginal cost of abatement, and the marginal benefits of abatement. But the institutions that are out there, the court system exists for resolving environmental damages, and the party that's causing those damages, there is an attempt on the part of the courts to resolve what are those damages and what is the liability that should be imposed on the admitter. And indirectly, there are all sorts of ways of trying to price that externality. For example, in sulfur dioxide, if you know what the marginal damages are, you can clearly provide either a subsidy or a tax to create the incentive for the admitter to invest in abatement. Right? So, the classic example of courts with regard to assigning liability rules, there is formal regulations that specify what is the burden that is imposed on oil companies who are responsible for an oil spill. We talked about the Exxon Valdez, the example that took place a couple years ago in the Gulf of Mexico with regard to British Petroleum. They too have been fined significantly. They've just reached a court resolution with regard to paying recreational users and businesses whose livelihood depends upon fishing in the Gulf of Mexico. And my recollection is the damage award was something like $7.6 billion. Right, so that's one set of institutions that are out there to pursue efficiency. Another set of institutions are legislation, regulations that are controlled by the executive branch of the federal government. The EPA, the Department of Energy, has authority for imposing different penalties on parties that end up being responsible for emissions. The Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, all of those have fines that are imposed for the violation of whatever the stated targets are of the regulators or the public sector. Ultimately, as we've shown again and again, if you could price the pollution, if you can find the right price, and you end up putting that price on the bad, if it's a negative externality, or if it's a good, a positive externality, putting a subsidy on that. In one case, the first case would be a tax, the second case would be a subsidy. Once again, you can get the optimal solution under those circumstances. Okay, now let's turn to benefit cost analysis. Up until now, we've talked about benefit and cost analysis from a 20,000 foot level. Right? You've gotten certain elements of the methodologies that are out there for measuring benefits. We talked about state preferences, we talked about reveal preferences. These are different methodologies for getting a fix on what the environmental benefits might be of preserving or conserving some natural resource. Now, to do this properly, we have to introduce some additional mechanics. And this additional mechanics really go to the time profile of the benefits and the time profile of the cost. Right? And in trying to represent in a scalar value that time profile, we're going to have to introduce the notion of interest rates. And you'll see that our discussion about interest rates, as in your reading for today's lecture, is equivalent to the discount rate. We'll explain that as we go along. Okay? one of the big issues that arises with regard to public sector or public policies is what is the appropriate discount rate for society as a whole. And once you have that interest rate, then you can analyze public projects. Think about it very simply. If a local government invests in establishing a park, which is a public good, everyone has access, and suppose it's never congested, so it's truly a public good in the sense of non-excludability and non-rivalry, all right? And you ask yourself, how can I get a fix about what the benefit is to this community of having the park? Well, it's not just the people who visit over the course of the first year of the park, right? It's the value to people that visit that park 5 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever the life of the park is. And that means that we have to make some determination about what is the value for an environmental good 10 years from now, what is its value 5 years from now, what is its current value. What is benefit cost analysis? And by the way, there's a huge segment of the economic profession that has their own club, their own tribe. It's called the Benefit Cost Society. And they get together once a year and sit around and talk with one another about how to measure benefits and costs. They have a journal, which is called the Journal of Benefit and Cost Analysis. I'm sure you all can't wait until you have the opportunity to publish in that journal, right? I've gone to one of those meetings, and that was many years ago, and I haven't gone since. But anyway, there are 3 basic methodologies out there for benefit cost analysis, and we're going to look at each of these today. The net present value, the benefit cost ratio, and the internal rate of return. Those are the 3 basic methodologies that exist for benefit cost analysis. Now, to motivate this in a very simple way, let's see how to do this in a very simple. Lily, I'll give you 2 choices, all right? I'll give you $1 today or $10 10 years from now. Which do you choose? Probably what? $1.10. No, I gave you 2 choices, discrete choices. Oh, I'm sorry, today. Come on. $1 today. I said $1.10. Where did that come from? Okay, $1 today. All right. So how did you go about making that choice? It's not enough to wait for. So you're not a delayed gratifier. Yes, Omega? And she didn't do it. I see. There is a question of trust, but let's abstract from that. Let's suppose that you can completely trust me. You know with probability 1 that you're going to get that $10 10 years from now. With probability 1, there's no risk of default. Say what? Well, that's right. That's exactly what they do, right? You get the present value after taxes are deducted, right? And you make the choice. Now, how does one go? Okay, that's a good example, but the simple one with Lily works as well. What lies behind that choice if sweep aside Omega's concern about trust, right? She doesn't trust her sister. That's her problem, not our problem, okay? You can trust me. I'll give you the $10 with probability 1. Now, how did you make the choice of $1 today? Fair enough. But there's something else out there. Suppose, I'm sorry, Ken, are you going to explain this to me? After 10 years, no, what's the value of the dollar after 10 years? To make them comparable, apples to apples, she knows that she has an option of $10 10 years from now. The question is, what's the dollar going to be worth to her 10 years from now? Now, if she takes the dollar and consumes it immediately, then it's the value of whatever she's consuming with that $1. What's that going to be worth to her 10 years from now to make it comparable to the choice of $10, right? We got it? There's a hand. Okay, thank you. Yes. Yes. That's right. Exactly. Yeah, for example, you're quite right. If Lily took the dollar and put it into a savings account, and it accumulated over that full 10 years, and at the end of 10 years it was worth $12, then she should clearly choose the dollar, right? Makes sense, right? Yes. Yes, I certainly am. I'm certainly ignoring inflation, but I'll get to that. I wanted to use this as an example to illustrate the time value of money. Now, we can complicate it by recognizing, as Omega noted, with regard to the risk that the counterparty will perform, the counterparty, namely me, with regard to giving her that $10 10 years from now. We can also complicate it by looking at the rate of inflation, that the value of the currency is going to change over time. But we'll get to that. Okay. All right, so the time value of money, the fundamental principle is that I end up with some return on the amount of money that's available to me today. And the interest rate is determined by the ratio of the payment that is made relative to the principal. In the case of the simple example with Lily, the principal is $1, right? And if she could put that into some investment and get a 50% return per year, at the end of 1 year, what's that $1 going to be worth? Lily, what's it worth at the end of 1 year? You weren't listening. You get $1, you get a rate of return on investing that $1 50 cents. What's it worth at the end of the first year? Yeah, exactly. It's that simple. This is fairly simple, but it's important in terms of recognizing what the relationship is between current values and future values. And the reason we have to sort this out is because for many environmental projects, we're investing scarce resources today, dollars today, but we're not going to get a return until tomorrow, till next year, till 10 years out. And to make the two comparable, we have to find a mechanism for making them directly comparable. And that is going to turn on the time value of money. The time value of money is going to turn on what is the return on that money, what is the interest rate on that money. Okay?